All right, welcome to Verum Fabula Fellowship. Today is November 1st, the 1st of November. Wow. All right. So VFF, this is going to be the second edition of Perelandra, and we have mostly everyone present. We do have one slacker who's falling behind, and everyone knows that it is Caitlin. She'll be here in a little bit, but we're going to go ahead and get started on this. And I just want your visceral reactions to the second part of this story. So we're probably going to get to up to and around chapter 8, I think. And if we want to go beyond that, we can, but we'll probably keep it so up to about chapter 8. So what do you guys think so far?
What's chapter 8? The numbers are a little bit...
Okay, chapter
7 is when he meets up with Weston.
Yeah, chapter 7 is when he meets Weston. So that's when he
woke after disturbed and dreamful sleep.
So chapter 7 is the conversation between Weston and Ransom, and then chapter 8 there beyond is the triune conversation of Weston, the Green Lady, and Ransom. So, so let's take it from, we'll have the conversations between the Green Lady and Ransom, and then Weston and Ransom, and see what we want to do with that.
Well, before we get to the Green Lady conversation, I think it's interesting to talk about the world itself and how it crafts it, because I think that's... there's actually some significant meaning, philosophically and theologically, in there.
Absolutely.
Bring it.
And in particular, the nature of the islands themselves, the little archipelagos, they are just so fascinating, and his reaction to them is so fascinating.
Yeah.
I think his initial...
Do you want?
I'm
Okay.
good. His initial reaction to the fruit that he has for the first time is super interesting, and also the first place that you kind of feel this presence that he feels really tangibly, like unlike he does on Earth from what's like you can tell given the context. Like he reaches out for the fruit, and then he eats it, and he's like, "Oh man, that was so good. Maybe I should have another." And then he reaches out again, and it's just like, "Wait."
Right, he has a different experience with it.
And he's kind of like, "Maybe this doesn't feel right." And then he just kind of lets it go back.
Perhaps the experience had been so complete that repetition would be a vulgarity, like asking to hear the same symphony twice in a day.
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah, I think that's a great,
That hit me too.
it's a great thing, and it also, I think it's interesting too because there's a lot of environmental themes in these books, but this one in particular, I think, sums up a lot of them, and it's like the difference between use and abuse. And that's so important in this narrative, and it comes in over and over and over again. Not in just the use of resources, but in the use of people, the use of words, and the use of conversation, ideas even. Like there's a difference between using something as it is intended, and just like Ken says, like almost a vulgar reuse, almost like seeing something twice. He talks about it a little bit out of the Silent Planet, but it's just a very interesting concept to ponder, and I think it's certainly has applications today, particularly in the farming world, but it's really, really interesting when you just kind of think about it like from a standpoint of just simply, if you just break it down to its core base, just using it or abusing it, or if you're using it so much that you're abusing it, that kind of situation is looked at as well. And then there's also the unmanned stuff later on, which we'll get to.
So what we're looking at here is we're looking at balance.
Kind of.
There is a homeostasis for every, not only atomically, but even in a sense behaviorally. There is a state in which we can engage in that is a more optimal state than others. There's a certain behavior we can do that is optimal. There's a behavior we can do that's suboptimal.
Yeah, in a way, I think that it might go a little bit deeper than that, because he's talking almost about our nature, and like our impulsivity, which it's interesting. His first reaction to the nature that he encounters there in this like pure, undefiled place is the opposite of the action that you would think one would take in a Garden of Eden setting. Right. Which I think it's almost like going back to the garden for him, but like there's maybe this implicit understanding of what he's reaching out for is something that is set apart.
So what causes that impulsivity? I mean,
yes.
Like in today, what causes that impulsivity in us?
Oh, scarcity mindset.
Scarcity,
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so you see that, and so when you don't have scarcity, C.S. Lewis says, I think it's in Mere Christianity, the moment self becomes aware of self, it becomes selfish, right? Because it's about survival, it's about, will I have enough? How do I not die? How do I not do this? He didn't have any of those feelings when he was there. None of that hit him from the time that he was there. He didn't have. So in Malacandra, his great sin was fear. He didn't have that here.
Why are you saying he didn't have that?
I don't know. I'm just saying the way Lewis writes him, he doesn't. He's like, I don't have the normal things that I have. You know, like you say, he normally would have continued to eat, but he's like, wait, this seems vulgar. So why is he having these new emotions? Why isn't fear there? Why is he not worried about being? He's okay with being naked. He's okay with these things that are instinctually in us, would present us with certain behaviors that would be okay and actually acceptable on earth. There, he's willing to let those go. There's something.
I don't think it's the recognition of the self that creates this fear or this scarcity mindset. Because I think you see that in animals that don't have self-awareness. That don't recognize or think about themselves in the third person. I think, this loss of this fear. I think we also lost, and I think we see this earlier on in this narrative as well. Quintessentially getting into his coffin and knowing that, he may go back or he may not go back, he may go at the end. Is that just acceptance of his immortality and finality?
But also,
everything else seems to be connected, I think, with death, right? And so all of these other fears and all these other anxieties and stuff like that, once that fear of death is gone, I think all the rest of them are gone as well.
Mm-hmm. And also, I think in this situation, the spirit's leading is much more palpable to him. Mm-hmm. And it's like in this world, there's like we all know that hoarding is not a good thing. So hoard is in and of itself destructive behavior. And yet we're compelled to do that. But at a certain point, we realize in ourselves, through either, the Spirit's leading or through others around us pointing it out, and if we can't see it, that this is not healthy behavior. And in this situation, it's like those walls are kind of down, and like he can connect to that reality much more clearly. And it's interesting too because it's much more of a reciprocal. It's much more of a reciprocal relationship in this as well. Oh, hello.
Oh, there she is.
Is this a seat? Is this a seat?
That's a seat and that's a seat. Whatever you want.
Sorry. Spread it over here.
You've missed a lot.
You missed everything.
Should have come in your costume that you had yesterday.
I should have just worn
Would you
that.
just slept in it?
I should have. I saw pink. You can see. My whole scalp is pink.
Awesome.
Yeah. How long have I missed? Did you stall?
We installed as late as we
We've
could.
been going for about 10 minutes.
Yeah, about 10 minutes. So we're just talking now about the environment that they're in and some of the attitudes and behaviors of Ransom that are different, and why are they possibly different? And what I was talking about in the fear the fear mindset of becoming aware of self is also something that Peterson says that his interpretation of the fall is when you know that you are vulnerable, you also know how to hurt others because you also know how they're vulnerable too. And so there's this thing of you becoming aware of your vulnerability also allows you to reach out and act in ways that you know another's weakness because you have that same weakness. And that's kind of what I was saying was there's no weakness here. He's not there's no threat. And so it also lets your guard down in that regard too. So which his guard does go up, of course. The fear does re-enter a little bit later. And we'll see where and why that does re-enter the process. Okay, so we've hit the environment, which David, I thought it was fantastic. I would have skipped over that, and I didn't, and that would have been a travesty. Really quick, Caitlin asked a question a long time ago that I have been thinking about since she asked it, because I had an answer, but I couldn't articulate the answer. And I think Lewis articulates the answer for me in a way that doesn't seem very articulate, not very explanatory, let me put it that way. But I think that it is. You asked me why or what does it mean to be a father, a father archetype? What's the definition of father? And he says it here, both the green lady says it about her and the king. But she says, who else would be their father? The king. Who else? But the king has no father. She says, he is father. I am mother. So if we go back to the unmoved mover, if we go back,
breaking out Aristotle, huh?
Yes, the unmoved mover. So if we go back to the uncreated creator, there has to be a first cause, right? And the mother and father are the first cause of that. You can't go any further back than the father. That, I think, is why God the Father calls himself the Father. He is the progenitor of all things that are created. He is the creative force. He is Father in that sense. And so for us, the Father archetype is the thing of which all life, creativity is inside of. And he's the progenitor of all creativity. And then the mother is also the thing in which you can go back further is the one who produces all of life. And that's called mother. And so we can't go back any further than that and say we can't describe anything, the progenitor of creativity and the being of all life. You can't go back any further than that. And I think that's, for me, that's a good enough explanation for that. All right. Where do you guys want to go? Where do you guys want to go next? Who has a burning thing? I mean, you guys have read this. Let me ask you a question. Compare this to Out of the Silent Planets. Just for a second, are you thinking like, was it captivating the conversation? There's only two people. There's only two people right now on an entire planet. Did he hold your attention with two people?
You mean Perelandra?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Of course.
Yeah. I didn't think that there wasn't any sluggish or dead spots in this. Maybe towards the very, 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 very end.
I was
But
going to say, who almost finished it? You finished it?
Today.
Okay. I'm 2/3. I stopped at 2/3.
I need to, so when I originally read it, I read the whole thing, I kind of skimmed that section that I was like, please let this part end. And I am interested to see how I feel when I read it again because I was so bored. So
that's at the very, very
maybe
end.
my brain maybe I've become
More solid.
older.
You become older.
Am I
Yeah,
older or younger?
Older again.
Older always seems like,
No, older's a good thing.
okay, well,
Especially in this world.
sometimes it feels like it's not a good thing. But then she does say, oh, you guys are so young, right? Sometimes when she starts laughing at them.
Yeah.
What gets me is his descriptions of the world. You know, like at the end of chapter 3, absolute rock blackness, the undimensioned, the impenetrable, pressed on his eyeballs. There is no moon in that land, no star pierces the golden roof, but the darkness was warm. Sweet new scents came stealing out of it. The world had no size now. Its boundaries were the length and breadth of his own body, and the little patch of soft fragrance which made his hammock, swaying ever more and more gently. Night covered him like a blanket and kept all loneliness from him. The blackness might have been his own room. Sleep came like a fruit which falls into the hand almost before you have touched the stem.
Oh, that was one of my
There's a big fruit theme in this book.
I love that. That last line.
I like how it's no loneliness too.
Yeah.
So what if someone dropped you, and we talk about this, if someone dropped you naked into a jungle, what's the first thing you would do? Nothing, because you don't know. It's the jungle you know nothing about. You don't do anything. You're just frozen, paralyzed in fear because you don't know what will kill you, what's beneficial. It's an unknown jungle.
It's like Jumanji.
It's like Jumanji. Here, he's dropped into an unknown world, and yet he feels content. I think David made a very interesting point because he's connected to the Spirit much more in this, and he's listening to.
That got me too. Is how it's a much more comforting place than Melicandra seemed.
Yes.
You know, when he was running through the jungle, the woods or whatever forest it was there, he was terrified.
Yes.
Of course, fear was the theme, but
Yes, fear. Yes, fear was the theme. So.
but here, you know, it's curious to him.
Yes.
And he's pondering all these different things and such, but it's there's no loneliness, there's no fear. He delights in the
So is it
joys and the good fruit and all that.
the one person with God is more than the person with all the multitudes? Is that kind of what we're feeling? I don't know.
I just have a very pragmatic mind because you asked what you would do when you dropped into the jungle. My first instantly, it's like you finish your sentence, was like water. Like that was like
Right.
right.
No, I get water, but do you know where water is?
Yeah, but that's because I'm a freak of nature and I like studying that stuff. So I guess that's just me.
Right, but I guess what they're saying is that you dropped into something. This guy, he knows nothing about this planet or anything.
Yeah.
Does this thing? Is there any death? And then there's no death here.
This is an interesting question because he has that struggle within the first about hour of being there when he starts to realize that he can't swim forever.
Right.
And he does actually say that fear does start to grip him at one point.
Right.
So it's interesting because there's Lewis walks this line a lot in this book with Ransom's perspective. There's this difference between a fallen creature being in an unfallen world and then an unfallen creature being in an unfallen world.
Yes.
And what that means for him. Because at certain times, his fallen nature very clearly asserts itself. And in those instances as well. And then we could even talk about where he feels like he's slapped in the face after he says that line, which is an interesting one. But yeah, because he definitely has moments where he dips into a Thulkundran version of himself.
Yeah.
And yet in that environment, it's more like that version of himself is more offensive than it would be in our world. Something he can't just walk away from as easy.
So each person has they have their. We'll miss you, David.
Alright, so you guys have fun. You gotta help someone get the book title. Send it to their publisher this week. We're rated by
Big stuff.
That was a tattoo on the side of your neck.
Oh, really?
Because
That's what it was? Okay. I wondered what it was.
It's gangsterish.
So, what David was saying before he had to leave was, what we have is we have a person, a fallen person in an unfallen world, and he has his fallen but redeemed epistemology, right? I don't know, Randy, you can correct me on this if you don't think this is. It seems like Ransom could be loosely alluded to Gray Gandalf to White Gandalf. maybe more White Gandalf in the third one, but he's gone through a transformation.
Oh yeah.
He's had some transformation. I'm not saying
There's definitely Melisandre served as a conversion experience for him.
so. He's a little more sanctified now as he's going in.
And hence, again, even with things like the coffin and stuff like that,
Yes.
that may even like symbolize in some kind of sense like a rebirth, right? So baptism, that Melisandre was baptism into this new, into this life, right?
Now, something that we may not, you may not know, but water. So, what is a water an archetypal symbol for in all literature? Water is a symbol for chaos, right? So, in Near East, they call it Tiamat, who's the water serpent, the water dragon that actually Marduk defeats, which Marduk is a Christ figure, I guess you would say. So this entire planet is chaos, right? But doesn't necessarily need to be conquered. And I think that's interesting because all creation myths have chaos that has to be conquered, except for one. There's one ancient tradition of literature wherein the chaos is not conquered, but it is put into order without it being necessarily overthrown in a battle. And that is Genesis chapter 1 is the only ancient tradition where God simply speaks and the chaos is under control. All other Near East and ancient traditions, there has to be an overthrowing of chaos. So I think it's interesting, huh?
Never mind.
Go ahead. You're going to disagree with that?
I'm going to disagree with that because I actually don't think that Scripture does that. I think it shows that God is sovereign over the chaos. But I think the whole part of Genesis and then the connection to the fall, right? When you have the serpent, this is kind of beyond where we are, but it may be relevant because we're talking about, of course, like the fall and stuff that happened here. Is that there's still this kind of chaos creature, which the serpent was also seen as a symbol of chaos in the ancient world, and so that even as God proclaimed his sovereignty over the chaos, this other kind of chaos came in subliminally and created chaos again.
Right.
From disorder and stuff like that again, which from Genesis to Revelation, the whole sea still stands as the symbol of chaos up until Revelation, which there's no more sea, right? So I don't think it's saying that God controlled the chaos as much as he's sovereign over the chaos and will ultimately conquer the chaos.
I would agree with that from Genesis chapter 2 to Revelation, but Genesis chapter 1, I would wholeheartedly contest you on that. We can have that argument at a later date, but I have a whole essay written on Genesis 1 and chapter 2.
It'd be a podcast.
There we go. We could do a podcast, Jack and Bear podcast on that.
I would love to hear that.
Yeah. So, but I appreciate that perspective. That'll be a lot to chew on because I think there's some really good stuff in there. So,
When he ripped apart the frogs, I was about to lose.
Okay.
Oh, I forgot about that.
Well, that's
I'm about to lose my mind.
yes. So before we get there, let's get to. All right. So.
Did I miss it? I'm just going through my notes and I just scribbled that one.
So let's jump ahead to Ransom meets the lady.
Right.
What are your feelings when Ransom meets the green lady? Are there any key things there that you guys want to pull on? Is there something that he said, something she said? What do you guys wrestle with in that we want to talk about? Because I have some stuff, but I want to get to what you guys are feeling, what you want to talk about.
Also, how awkward he is.
Well, the whole conversation was awkward because he was coming from here and going this way, and she's going this way, and for the longest time they couldn't ever meet and mesh and realize that they were talking the same thing. It was all kind of cross purpose-wise, not intentionally, but because his background and his understanding of everything was so different from hers.
Right.
With his coming from a fallen world, being a fallen creature, her being so pure and so peaceful and such, that it's understandable that they wouldn't understand each other and where each other's coming from. It was sometimes amusing, sometimes frustrating. It's like, can you understand what the other's saying?
You understand the
I
words?
felt so sad. I felt very sad reading just the conversations that they had. Even from the first, I was like, I know where he's going with this. Like, this is sad. Just the growing older kind of thing. I like how he worded it, but
Is that? Do you guys think that was an appropriate way to the older and younger type thing? Is that good?
I liked it a lot. I thought that's something. I think that's why I thought it was so sad. You know, we talk about getting older, and you want to go back to your childhood and fairy tales and all that. You know.
But since Perelandra is making me older now, so as David was saying, there's a connection between the Green Lady had this connection. So there would have, even though she was the only person, there was not necessarily loneliness because she was connected to Perelandra and at least talking to her.
So I think she was fulfilled, like without that.
That's a great word.
Fulfilled. You know, she was fine, and then him giving her that. It's not that wasn't true. You know, wisdom is just it just showed like the weight that wisdom has.
So what would be so could we contrast and say that pre-fallen Eve was fulfilled, and as soon as now the fallen, they can never be satisfied.
Never be satisfied.
And I think that's like when you do get wisdom, like the things he was saying to her were true, and they were.
Yeah.
I don't want to use the word good, but just the weight of that. I think she didn't have to carry the weight of it before. The weight of glory wasn't heavy then. She just had it, you know, she was just natural to her, and now it's too much. That wisdom and a sense of truth is too heavy for her to even hold now.
So when she says that about being branched out, that the branches are, I might have that.
What part was that?
Chapter 6. Here we go.
Oh, that's fine.
Where will it end? Said the lady, speaking more to herself than to him. I have grown so old these last few hours that all my life before seems only the stem of a tree, and now I'm like branches shooting out in every direction. They are getting so wide apart that I can hardly bear it.
Yeah. This is my other question about the young and old, because also when she learns dark things, she becomes older, right? Like when he talks about when the unman is talking to her, like presenting her with other ideas, she's becoming older, right?
Somewhat. Well, I think we'll get to that because we can really pull that apart when we get there.
Input, like she's gaining more knowledge, and it wasn't it was the tree of knowledge. You know? It wasn't the tree of evil. You know, like that's not the way that it's described. It's just a question of whether it's good knowledge or unhelpful knowledge, bad knowledge from chaos.
There's like an innocence that leaves her at times when she becomes older.
Well, I like the way William Paul Young in the book Eve, the way he presents it is he presents it as Adam turns from God. God never shuns Adam at all. It is Adam who turns away and looks at something other than God.
That's another cool perspective.
That's another cool perspective on this. So there is also another part of this that I think is that I really want is just before this. Wait, no, this is just a second. There's two things that Ransom does, and I want to contrast this with the next conversation that we're having. But I want to see what you guys think of this. Against his better judgment, Ransom found himself goaded into argument. But even you, he said, when you first saw me, I know that you were expecting and hoping I was the king. When you found I was not, your face changed. Was that not an unwelcome event, or not unwelcome? Did you not wish that it would be otherwise? Oh, said the lady. She turned aside with her head bowed and her hands clasped. In an intensity of thought, she looked up and says, you make me grow older more quickly than I can bear, and walked a little further off. Ransom, wondering what he had done, it was suddenly borne upon him that her purity and peace were not as they seemed, things settled and inevitable, like purity and the peace of an animal. They were alive, therefore breakable, a balance maintained by a mind, and therefore, at least in theory, able to be lost. Several times he's goaded into saying something to, in a sense, provoke her. He's frustrated with her answers of purity, and he wants to needle her and just put her in her place for it. Just go, no. I goaded into argument. What do you guys think about? I'll read this next one, then we can really pull it apart here. Why, said the lady, oh piebald, you're making little hills and valleys in your forehead. Why do you give a little lift of your shoulders? Are these things a sign of something in your world. They mean nothing, said Ransom hastily. It was a small lie, but there it would not do. It tore him as he uttered it like a vomit, and it became of infinite importance. The silver metal in the golden sky seemed to fling it back at him. As if stunned by some measureless anger in a very air, he stammered an emendation. They mean nothing I can explain to you. The lady was looking at him with a new and more judicial expression, perhaps in the presence of the first mother-son she had ever seen, and she was already dimly forecasting the problems that might arise when she had children of her own. He's entering into her epistemology and into the world contentious behaviors, spite, in a sense, making her older in a way that may not be optimal, tripping her up, if you will. Could he cause her to fall? Paul talks about us being stumbling blocks. Is he going to let his ego get the best of him where he creates the thing? Maleldo sends him here, and he's the one that trips up everything. Is he the serpent? What kind of thing? What kind of emotion are you going to have where you're like, I told a lie in a land there was no lies? What do you guys think of that? What do you think of his goading and lying and misdirection and egotism in here?
Just felt familiar, honestly. Felt very familiar. It's like with kids almost. Sometimes you pity them to the point because they are so innocent. They don't understand the evil in the world. And when they get to a certain age, it's almost like you want them to know. You want them to get it. So I felt like a guilty sense of familiar, I guess, just felt really familiar to Ransom and why he did what he did. Because I feel like, whenever it says we have that pit in his stomach, he felt remorse for it. It's not like he's the evil one. He's not the one who is in his heart of hearts, evil. But he just shows his earthliness so well that, it's just like he doesn't belong there. And you know that immediately when he does that, he doesn't belong there. No, he doesn't belong there from a sense of, we kind of see what's going to happen, so obviously he is. But he wasn't made for that world, obviously, because of who he is. He's not pure enough to be there.
Yes, he wasn't made for that world. He wasn't pure enough. So I think he's wrestling with the idea if I say too much, I might be the cause of the downfall. In a sense, I don't think he ever says anything to that degree. But I'm reading this thinking, if I'm brought to that world, I want to go, oh, am I the serpent? Am I the beguiler?
I think he feels that way even more because I think a few pages later, maybe the next page, she says to him, how could there be anything I don't want? He was like, you didn't want me here. You wanted the king that's here looking for. And she was like, yeah, but how could there be anything that I don't want? I think then he even reflects more of like, wow, I do not. That was kind of when it smacked him in the face and he realized, like, what am I doing? That was the moment. Which I thought was really neat in general, just thinking of what it would be like a world with no wants, How interesting it would be before the fall where there was nothing you desired because you were, like I said, fulfilled already. There's no need to, you wanted everything, but you didn't need anything, I guess.
So that would be, in a sense, what being sanctified and becoming like Christ is to be fulfilled. It's to have no wants, no desires. Which is the island that we long, the longing that we want, and that. Any other thoughts on these conversations? Also,
did you guys talk about the after where she's talking the same conversation where she's like, I'm like the branches of the tree, where he says, she says. Who thought of it being hard? The beast would not think it hard. We already talked about this?
No.
The beast would not think it hard if I told them to walk on their heads. It would become their delight to walk on their heads. I am his beast, and all his biddings are joys. It is not that which makes me thoughtful, but it was becoming into my mind to wonder whether there were two kinds of bidding. Because they're having that whole conversation about, he's like, do I talk too much? She's like, what does that mean? He's, well, why don't you just say what you mean then? and it goes into that conversation, part of the conversation. Like, she doesn't know anything other than if he tells her to do it, it's a joy. And we're all like, oh my gosh, if he asks me to do this, what am I going to do?
And he's projecting.
Yeah.
I think he's afraid that because he has been tainted with ulterior motives, right? Because we all have ulterior motives. She only has one motive, and it's the real motive.
Right.
You know, so I think he's afraid of himself, like we are afraid of ourselves to make the wrong choice. Like, you know, we talked about a few weeks ago with How to Silent Planet, like we can be the villain. Like, we can identify with the villain. She can't. She literally can't.
Right. She cannot be the villain in this
I
point.
love it. She's like, he starts to comment, like, some of our wise men have said, and then she's like, let's wait and ask the king, for I think, Piebald, you don't know much more than I do about this. Yes, the king, by all means, if only we can find him.
I will say that if we contrast Weston and Ransom coming in, even though they've both been to the planets, they both know old solar, there's this, Ransom does come in with a humility. He realizes I don't know anything, and I'm going to give you everything that I know, and here's what I know, my junk and all. I'm going to impart you this is what I know, and let's have a conversation. Ransom doesn't know why he's there, so I think that gives his humility. He's like, I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know why I'm here. I don't know who you are. What's going on? I'm just trying to feel everything out. Where Weston comes in, and he's a little more. He knows what he's about. So, what do you guys think about the fixed land? What is going on with the fixed land? What is that? Why won't Meldil let them on the fixed land?
Forbidden fruit.
Huh?
It's the forbidden fruit, right? I love. And he goes into this more. I don't know what page, but when he starts talking about why, I don't remember if it was Weston or I don't remember who it was, but they were just discussing why she wouldn't be allowed there. And I thought that was interesting for Lewis because he was obviously, trying to speak to the Christian readers, I guess, to say, if you've had, it's almost like it was Lewis just talking to like me or you, saying, this is what I think, why that was even part of the plan. Like, why was there an option?
Right.
So I thought that was really interesting to say. It's the one thing that you have the choice to obey. Because if you don't, all the other things you aren't made to obey because you want to do it. So this is the one thing where you can choose not to obey if you want. I thought that was an awesome way to put it.
Yeah.
I thought that was really good.
Anybody else on the fixed land question?
I think it's interesting, like how fixed land is stability, and the rest of the lands are constantly in some form of chaos. It sounds like there might be some rhyme or reason to the lands that are moving, and so later on there's a scene. I don't know how far if this is getting too far ahead, but where she has the clothes. Like the mirror and some things like that, just start introducing the idea of possessions. Like up until that point, she hadn't really thought about the idea of like owning something. And so like the stable land would be a place to like start owning things and building things, and maybe that could. I don't know if that could happen or not on the rest of. I can't remember how the rest of the book goes. But I don't know. I kind of thought about like. I don't know. Not really sure where I was.
No, I think you're hitting that because on the floating lands, you don't own anything. There's no agriculture on there. You are sustained by what Meldil allows you to have out there, and then you go where the waves take you. You have there's no directionality on the fixed lands. Yes, possessions come into it. Agriculture comes into it, creating societies and things. And I as you were talking, I was reminded of Israel crying out for a king, and God going, "Let me be your king." They're like, "No, we want a king like other nations." He's like, "No, just look for me." And that stability creates.
The stability on the fixed land, you don't have to trust in the Meldil as much.
Right.
When you're on the moving places, you have to trust no matter what. You have to trust him.
Yeah.
Right? Because you don't know where you're going. You don't know what's going to happen. And the fixed land, it seems like she's saying, "Oh, we're only allowed to go there for short periods of time." But it's almost like God is like, if you get set here for too long, you won't need me anymore, or you'll think you won't need me anymore.
Right.
And you'll go to other gods. Which I only thought of that because you said that.
Yeah.
That was good. That was a good observation. I was like, I don't know.
This is why we do this.
Yep.
Just on that note, I mean, you can see there being an analogy for Israel, wandering and
Yeah.
seemed to be anytime they set up camp somewhere and found some other permanency, they got trouble,
Right.
And so God put them to continue to stay wandering.
Yeah. He just told Abraham to go.
Yeah.
He's like, just go. I'll tell you. I'll tell you once you're moving. And but we desire. I was telling the kids today. We were discussing in a history book. We were discussing how did civilizations begin, and we were talking about risk management. You want food. You're hunters and gatherers, but guess what? You're not in control of the migration of the animals. You're not in control of how the berries produce and things like that. And so you could be in want. However, if you go from being nomadic and you can learn how to create tools and domesticate animals, then you can be a little more managing the risk, and you can create your own food and your own supplies, and animals can reproduce, and suddenly you create a sustainable farm, and then a bunch of farms create sustainable farms, and you create civilizations and cities and government. That's how it all starts, because we want to sit here, and I want to know that you're not going to pull out a gun and shoot me, or you're not going to steal my stuff, because we've agreed to live in a state of civility. That's what we're looking for, which is awesome in Perelandra. That existed before that existed. We didn't have to build up to that. That was the thing.
Yeah.
And we're trying to reinvent that to get back to that. And we do a decent job, and then we do a miserable job. We cycle around. So, does anybody else want to wrestle with anything else in the conversations with the Green Lady? Is there anything else there that jumped out at you?
Something else I wanted to say about that. This goes back to the old and the young thing too. I don't know if it's right to read the word ignorance into it, or she's innocent, but she's also ignorant. It's like with becoming older and wiser, or not necessarily wiser, but older. It's like she becomes more aware of things, and I like how Weston, kind of uses that to play up like the way he tries to drive the thing is you should know these things, and even Ransom says his words are almost always true.
Yeah.
But they're not. And so Ransom, I like how more what you were saying, he realizes at some point pretty early on that he better not lie, because it's the thing, the butterfly effect thing, even if it's an innocent lie, or a white lie, I guess you'd say, it's this could have ramifications that are beyond his control. But anyways, back to the ignorance and innocence thing, though. I started thinking about, I think he mentions this later on too, or when Ransom was thinking about how eventually God would have come and given us, or Adam and Eve, or in the situation of the lady, more and more knowledge, and more wisdom. If we hadn't fallen, we would have gone. I've heard this. I don't know if this is true or not, but the cosmology of the Garden of Eden, that the tree of knowledge was actually halfway up the mountain, and so when we took it, we went down the mountain out of the garden. But if we had not taken it, God would have brought us up higher and higher up the mountain, and would given us more and more knowledge and more wisdom. Just think about the older kind of thing. We would have become more like Him in the way that He intended, and not more like Him in the way that Satan tricked us into becoming.
Right.
Like Him.
I know. I think that is right along with everything that we actually are in this group. We end the group with further up and further in, because that is the goal. Leaf by Niggle points to the mountain, which is further up and further in. No, I think that is a fantastic observation for what's going on here.
He talks about the ignorance. I think the ignorance and innocence thing is, he talks about that a lot, or he alludes to it a lot. There's a quote. I don't even know what chapter chapter 9, when he's talking about like how extremely evil Weston was. I'll just read it because it's just so good. It's exactly what you're talking about, basically. It almost comes full circle whenever you're so ignorant, but you're just twisting it just a little bit. It almost makes you seem innocent again. It like brings it full circle. He says, the extremity of its evil had passed beyond all struggle into some state which bore a horrible similarity to innocence. It was beyond vice, as the lady was beyond virtue.
Beyond, yes.
I thought that was an amazing quote. I love that.
Yeah. All right, so, all right. Then, quite involuntarily, he added in English, "By Jove, what was that?" She had also exclaimed there was something like a shooting star that seemed to streak across the sky far away on their left, and some seconds later, an indeterminate noise reached their ears. "What was that?" he asked again, and this time in Old Solar. "Something has fallen out of deep heaven," said the lady. Her face showed wonder and curiosity, but on earth we so rarely see these emotions without some mixture of defensive fear that her expression seemed strange to him. All right, so that is cannon fired. And we know that to be Ransom shouted. The lady pointed. Almost at the same time, they made it to the island. We can go back and talk about their journey to the island if you want to. But Ransom shouted, and the lady pointed almost at the same time, about 2 miles off. The dark object, coppery green out of the water, and there was some small round object. If he'd been looking down on the earthly sea, Ransom would have taken first sight as a buoy. "We do not know what it is," said the lady, "unless the thing fell out of deep heaven this morning." "I wish I had a pair of field glasses," thought Ransom, for the lady's words had awakened him a sudden suspicion. The longer he stared at the dark blob, the more his suspicions was confirmed. It appeared to be perfectly spherical, and he thought he had seen something like that before. Ransom came on a ship constructed by Perelandra, and he comes down in it. The Oyarsa of Malacandra said that the bent one was limited to Earth, the Tholacandra, and he couldn't come out. But what did he need? He needed something to come out. He couldn't himself come out. What did he need to come out? He's a parasite, right? So he needs a vehicle. And so he couldn't come out himself. He couldn't display himself. He had to hide himself, disguise himself. He could not come out and reach out and try to grab something. Oyarsa said, or I would slap him back again and keep him contained. But he came, he piggybacked and hijacked a ride. So we know at this point what this is. We know that this is Weston. And I think there's an interesting contrast here missionally between the two. And I think it's very interesting that, well, I guess we'll get into the missional aspect of this. So, Ransom tries to talk about the Eldila and says, hey, there are some that are, he says this, there have been Eldila who did not think it a joy. How? You spoke yesterday, lady, of clinging to the old good instead of taking the good that came. Yes, for a few heartbeats. There is an Eldil who clung longer and who has been clinging since before the worlds were made. The old good would cease to be good if he did that. Yes, it has ceased, and still he clings. So we're being introduced. This is evil. So this is the serpent. This is the serpent in the garden. He's hit. What do you do? What do you do if you're? What are you guys thinking as this happens when Ransom looks down? Crap! It's Weston. He might have 100 men with him. I don't know how many men he has with him. Evil has come. So evil is here. What do I do?
And he immediately thinks, what do I do?
Yes.
He doesn't think, what would Perelandra have me do?
Good point.
And I was kind of nervous about that because he was immediately going like we all do.
Mm-hmm.
What can I do? What do I need to do? And not stopping to ask, what does God want me to do? What does Perelandra want me to do? And I'm thinking, oh my gosh, he's going to screw it up. Because that's what we do when we do it wrong.
I can't remember. Does he actually engage in conversation with Melinda while he's in Perelandra specifically? Does he ever? I can't remember.
Yeah, and he's gotten meetings, pressurings and such from Melinda.
Little unctions, but
yeah,
he for sure does towards the end. I'm not finished. I still have
yes.
70 pages, but even before.
But as he's engaging with the enemy, I don't think he actually purposely goes, "Hey, big guy, what should I do in this situation?" He's relying on just his epistemology. He's relying just on his experience and going, "What am I?" Because again, he still doesn't know why he's here.
Yeah, until someone tells him.
And so he gets that unction.
Yeah.
But he doesn't. He still doesn't know. What am I doing here? So now he realizes. So I think when he sees Weston, he realizes, okay, I'm not the serpent. I'm not the snake.
Yeah.
I'm not the monster here. Oh, what do I do? This is going to get really bad. Weston's a bad dude. He's probably about weapons. He's probably about people with him. It's just her. I don't know. Can she defend herself? Does she know how to defend herself? So this is why I say fear enters in, because now there is a threat to bodily harm. There's a threat to the world. There's a threat to the virginity of the world. The actual going forward of the world now is everything's in jeopardy because this guy lands and he knows, he can see it. Any thoughts? Any other thoughts on that? So the lady.
It turns out worse than if you want to go ahead and go there. It
Yes.
turns out worse than he thought it was going to.
All right, so let's go. So she says, "Hey, I gotta get the island. It's coming. I don't have a choice. The tide's coming in. The sea's rising. I have to go." And then Ransom says, "Yeah, you go on. I can't go." And so then Weston and he have a conversation down there. What was the most significant thing you thought of the conversation between Ransom and Weston? What was the most like this?
Weston's an insufferable prick.
I would agree. Yes. Even when he doesn't have demonic influence, he's just as himself. He's insufferable. Yeah.
He sucks worse with a demon inside of him.
He's a great character, though. I mean, he's fantastic because he's not wrong on a lot of things.
I know. That's once again, Lewis does it so well. You identify with some of the things he says. You start wondering, well, maybe, things that he's telling her, some of them are true and some of them are good. But then he does that one little twist.
He actually steelmans a lot of his villains, and I love that.
He says, let me see, where is this? One of my favorite things that Lewis wrote here is he said, it's reminded me of something we read, and it wasn't Weight of Glory, but it was in those essays that I read. It was in the whole book, Weight of Glory. I don't remember which one, but he says the external and, as it were, dramatic conception of the self was the enemy's true aim. He was making her mind a theater in which that phantom self should hold the stage. He had already written the play. Well, that was just such a Lewis line. If that was in a game, I could have called that. He wrote that. If it was who said this, I could have guessed.
It's right there.
Yeah, phantom self should hold the stage. He had already written the play.
So Weston comes, and this is an upgraded Weston. So we have an upgraded Ransom. He's leveled up. But Weston's also leveled up, right? So what new skill set and superpowers does Weston have now that he didn't previously have?
Fluency in the old Solar language.
He's mastered the language, which makes him formidable. That he's mastered the language, because now, especially with a little bit of demonic influence, he can twist the truth just slightly to trip people up. So he's fluent now. He knows enough, right? Okay. What else has he been upgraded with?
He's changed his motive a little, right?
His motive changed, yes.
It's more powerful now. When I read it, I was like, wow, that sounds kind of like what we do.
Mm-hmm.
Shove Christianity down people's throats all the time.
So he's gone.
Familiar.
He's no longer pointing at the physical, but now he's aiming at the transcendent of some
He
sort.
even says, he's like, this should sound familiar to you, the Holy Spirit. And I was like, whoa, wait.
So the other upgrade is his theology, not just his motive, but his theology. And so he begins to tell Ransom, you've got some convoluted things in your theology. We'll work it out because I'm enlightened now, and I can actually help you come to understand your Christianity even more. And so Ransom says, well, if this voice in your head, if this thing would tell you to kill me, would you do it? Sure. Like, wait, then we don't believe the same thing. Your Holy Spirit, my Holy Spirit, we have a false equivalence here. We're not speaking the same language. But the upgrade of theology makes Weston very dangerous because he's no longer just looking at the physical, but he is pointing something beyond, and he's a true believer in it, and that makes him very, very formidable.
I think it makes him more dangerous than he was in Perelandra because he does have the potential here to pull a character like Ransom onto his side, or characters that would in general agree with and you see this within the world of religion too, right? Cults and stuff like that can attract people so quickly and so subliminally.
Yes.
And they don't look like the external world, and yet, you think about like how cult leaders can use sex, right? And it doesn't look anything like the world, but it's sanctioned because of the use of like holy and religiously defined language, or violence outside the world is evil, but we see violence practiced within the world of religion and theology, given that kind of verbiage, all of a sudden becomes sanctioned and holy.
Yes.
Honestly, something that people are more willing to give their lives for, die for, fight for. So I think in this sense, like, in terms of leveling up, he's also leveled up in his ability to be dangerous.
Yes.
I was thinking it's very cult theory.
Yeah.
And that's my thought.
Yes. Yeah. Very cool.
But even in the fall, Satan used theology.
Yes, he did.
And it wasn't.
Did not God say?
It wasn't attractions of the world. It was the attractions of using theology.
Right. And so what makes Randy is a great point, that what makes cults so dangerous is the fact that they don't negate the sacred, but they actually employ the sacred.
Yep.
Because we need the sacred in our lives. We need that religious thing that sets something up that we aim beyond ourselves. We need that sacredness. And so Weston now is going, oh yeah, I know these things are, I actually now can point at the sacred just like you. And so, now this is a battle for the soul of Perelandra in a sense. So this is not just, I want to take over and the fixed land. No, I want to rule the whole thing.
Well, you often have this division between sacred and secular that's put out there, but I think the reality is sacred ends up becoming, sacred always trumps secular.
Every time.
Even for secularists, right? Even to take secularism and it often gets turned into a religion, or have religious ideals to it, or values, or things like that really is theology's language, sacred language, or concepts of meaning and all that kind of stuff, aspiration and love and trust and faith and friendship and all of that. Like, those are all these metaphysical and therefore theological ideas. So sacred always is going to win out.
Yes.
This is what I think is recognizing.
I listened to Dawkins and I think Ricky Gervais have a conversation, and when they talked about the universe, the language they always use is it's majestic, or it's magical, or it's this, and you go, those aren't scientific terms. Those are terms of adoration and of sacredness and the holiness, and those are terms set aside for religious things. So you're starting into the metaphysical realm, and so Weston is extremely dangerous now because we're dealing in a theological battle. It's all metaphysical, conceptual, and he's become extremely dangerous. So, and let's see, where does I'm trying to find out where. So there's a point. Oh, he says so. Weston says, well, you have a dichotomy here. You have a dichotomy. You separate good and evil, God and good and bad, and God and the devil. And all these. Like, to me, they're the same thing. Is your God and your devil are both pictures of the same force. So to him, it doesn't matter because it's one. And so there's sort of some pantheism in here that he's tapped into.
Yeah, it's like he says he didn't. He's just like dismissing goodness, which is almost worse than acting like it doesn't exist.
Oh,
he
yes.
says it did not defy goodness; it ignored it to the point of annihilation. I thought that was a fantastic way to put it. Not defy goodness; it ignored it to the point of annihilation. It's almost scarier than.
Yes. Well, he says right here, your devil and your God are both the pictures of the same force. Your heaven is a picture of a perfect spirituality ahead, and your hell is a picture of the urge or the nissus, which is driving us on from behind it. Hence, the static peace of one and the fire and darkness of the other, the stage of emergent evolution beckoning us forward is God. The transcendent stage behind, ejecting us, is the devil. Your own religion says, after all, the devils are fallen angels. And Ransom says, and you are saying precisely the opposite as far as I can make out. The angels are devils who have risen in the world. It comes to the same thing, said Weston. You just go, wow, he doesn't have the idea that they're the same thing. It doesn't matter, devils, gods, it's all moving us towards evolution. It's all still, so he still has that evolutionary concept coming in. And then, in the process of this, we lose Weston. Because he says, where does he say that?
Idiot, said Weston, his voice almost a howl, and he had risen to his feet. Idiot, he repeated. Can you understand nothing? Will you always try to press everything back into the miserable framework of your old jargon about self and self-sacrifice? That is the old accursed dualism in another form. There is no possible distinction in concrete thought between me and the universe, insofar as I am the conductor of the central forward pressure of the universe. I am it. Do you see, you timid, scruple-mongering fool? I am the universe. I, Weston, am your God and your devil. I call that force into me completely. Exactly.
Then the horrible thing began to happen. Spasms like proceeding, a deadly vomit twisted Weston's face out of recognition. So that's what he was there for. And you hear later on when Weston and he are alone, sometimes Weston would call out and say, Ransom, please save me. I'm locked in here, and I have no way to get out. Can you know that I'm still here? Why did they bring me here? I wanted to be part of this. I could have helped him out. But all the enemy wanted was his vessel to get there. He just needed a vehicle. He's a parasite. He doesn't have any physical means of his own.
He invited him in.
But he invited him in. He says, "Here, possess me."
It's a dangerous game.
That is a dangerous game. So Lewis shows us here, is Maleldil and this demon, are they the same thing? Are God and the devil the same? Is Weston correct?
No.
Because Maleldil illuminates and brings out the best and makes an optimal human, whereas the devil comes in and subjects and pushes down and actually eradicates human nature. You see this theme play out a lot in movies. There's one, Divergent, when the lady says, it actually is human nature that's the weakness of man, and we want to drive that out. Where God says, that's what I want to redeem. That's the best part of you, is the human nature, is the fallen part. That's the part I want to redeem. Where if man and Satan in our mind is, that's what needs to be cleaned up and eradicated and removed. We'll see that in that hideous strength as well. We need to separate humanity from its humanness, and then we'll actually have real humanity. We'll have true humanity. That we'll have a pure race.
We think we can do it ourselves, right? Because the only way we can be redeemed, the other sense, and actually our humanness being good, is if God redeems it. There's no way we can do that. We're not good enough to do that. So by saving ourselves, it's eradicating ourselves. That's the only way that we can make sense of it all. Because the other way is just choosing God to do it for us.
So this is one of the reasons why I came back from atheism into Christianity. Because I went down Hinduism, I went down Buddhism, I went down every path I could go to. And what I found was not only nihilism, but it was I had to save myself.
Yeah.
And I couldn't, and I realized, I'm like, God, I can't get out of bed on time. How am I going to be the person who saves myself and elevates myself to an optimal state to where I have no suffering or I flourish. I don't know how to do that. And then it always bothered me that that the goal of Hinduism was the blowing out of self, was to not exist, was to dehumanize yourself so much that if you could dehumanize yourself, you could eradicate suffering, but also flourishing, to the point where you became nothingness. That's what Ramana means, the blowing out into nothingness. And I was like, that seems like a waste of existence. The thing trying to unmake myself doesn't matter. Well, why would the I make itself not to matter? It seemed like a contradiction. I could never wrap my mind around that concept where Jesus was like, no, that fallen part of you, I want that. I will trade that crap right there, and I will turn you into be like me. I will let you sit in heavenly places with Christ Jesus. I will make you a co-heir with me. I will invite you into the Trinitarian relationship. And I'm going, if given the choice, that's a hard one, but I think I'll take this. So.
Yeah, that's good.
All right. I don't think we'll get to chapter 8. I think next time we're just going to deal with the entire conversation between the three, because I think it warrants an entire conversation just on Weston, Ransom, and the Green Lady, because there's so much in there. There is, I will tell you, one of the most haunting things that I have that just every time I hear it, like it gives me chills, is Ransom, Ransom, Ransom.
He had the audio
Nothing.
book on today.
Oh, and he kept saying that?
Thousands of times,
Yeah.
Ransom,
I was in
Ransom.
another room and I was indoors.
Yes, it's rough, isn't it? It's like,
Have you seen The Exorcist before?
Huh?
Have you seen The Exorcist before?
Yes.
I know.
That's what it reminds me of.
Oh,
Yeah.
Just those little taunting things. That's just
so
like,
eerie.
no reason.
No reason.
No
Just
reason at all. Just to throw some chaos into it all.
exactly.
Throw some
Rip the
chaos.
legs off the frogs.
Oh, that
because-
just made me so furious.
Yes.
I couldn't
Makes
handle
your
that.
skin hurt.
Yeah,
The
it does.
purity of it. It's like, like being the reader on the outside, just seeing the purity of the world, and this is how it started. Just like,
Lewis did a fantastic job of creating an atmosphere where you felt relaxed and you felt purity. You actually got to taste. You could feel the purity, the warmth of the ocean waters, the bubbles that refreshed you every time they burst. The fruit, the bubbles that burst over you. There was this refreshment. There was no fear. There was all this contentment and as Caitlin said, fulfilled. You fulfilled, not needing anything, and then when sin enters in, and suddenly your skin starts to crawl because you're like, this is not supposed to be here. This is not supposed. How do we save the lady? How do we save the lady? And the way that she's saved is something that gets me emotional. Like every time I listen to this, and I just, oh my gosh, I wrestle with the resolution of Weston. I wrestle with it a lot. So.
I just have to say, the last thing you were talking about, like the purity of Perelandra and how he does a good job making you feel the atmosphere. I just underlined these 4 adjectives he uses on, I don't know what, I think we just passed it, but he says that it was sharp, sweet, wild, and holy. And I just thought those are the best. Like, if I could choose 4 words to describe the place I would want to be, it would be sharp, sweet, wild, and holy.
Which
it's so good.
Reminds me of how I'm guessing it would feel to be around Aslan.
Yeah, very much so.
Because he's
Sharp, sweet, wild, and holy.
he's not tame. He's good, and that's how you feel. It's not a tame land, but it's good, and I think it's the king. I tell you, yeah. So
It's scary.
huh?
It's scary.
Yes.
That's why I like the wild. I love the word wild going in there.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
that's good.
this was fantastic, guys. I'm so glad you all came out, and
One more week of this one, right?
yeah, I think we could probably wrap it up. Randy's raising his eyebrow. Maybe
At least one more week.
at least one more
I'd
week.
say one more, probably two.
Maybe we'll see how far we get. But
17 pages left.
the conversation is just so good, and I think there's a lot theologically we can wrestle with in here. Actually, so much of the book can be broken out. We could spend years going through just the sci-fi trilogy and the theology that Lewis has in here. It is so rich. This book, the more I listen to it, the more I fall in love with it. The richness of it, it just seems to be so meaty. You can just continue to go back and feast again and again and again and again.
Red beef and strong beer.
Red beef and strong beer. Out of this island planet is kind of like a stale cold sandwich compared to Perelandra. So,
where's that hideous strength lie?
That hideous strength for me will always be a favorite because it is the fictionalization of Abolition of Man, my favorite Lewis book, and so it's tied with this one for me.
It's like watching an action thriller movie, in my opinion.
Okay.
Like, to me, that's where you have all the characters and all the.
It's like Voyage of the Dawn Treader. Just
I don't know.
It's completely different. So
I find to be because you're dealing with so many people in the third book.
You don't get Ransom's thoughts. It's not first person.
If Ransom is even in that book.
If Ransom's even there, who knows? But it's and if you guys wanted to go really deep into Lewis, we could actually do Dark Tower, which is an unfinished Lewis book. But it is the fourth Ransom installment.
no way. There's a fourth one.
Yeah, but it wasn't completed. So
you just ends like on a.
it just ends on a page.
The
Yeah,
book.
but
I haven't read
but
it.
it's pretty interesting. Dark Tower.
Dark Tower.
The concept is really
Why did he
quite cool.
finish it?
He just
died.
Yes.
Oh, when he
I
was
mean,
finishing it?
yes. I mean, that's,
Wait, that was years and years after he started this series.
it was actually controversial if he actually wrote it or not. Again,
It seems like that was like
people like Linsgu brought up that Walter Hooper actually tried to write it himself and couldn't finish it and passed it off on Lewis's. But there were actually people that were Lewis's students that actually said, no, Lewis gave me this to proofread, and I actually was reading this book, so no, Walter Hooper did not make this up. I actually read it, 10 years before, and
Because
so
he wrote, Out of the Silent Planet, how many years?
38.
38 years before.
Yeah. No, 38. He wrote in 38. Yeah, 1938 is when he published Perelandra. Out of the Silent Planet, I think. And then 44, and then 48. So.
Wrap up.
Yeah, wrap up.
Wow.
All right. Guys, we'll see you next Monday. Further up.
Further in.